Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking on a massive topic. We are fundamentally shifting our entire relationship with fear. You know, for most of us, fear just sits right there on the throne of our minds. It dictates what we do, what we publish, who we talk to, and ultimately who we actually become. But what if we took fear off that throne? What if we demoted it from this dictator that completely commands your life to a simple data point that just reports information? Well, today we're going to explore a really groundbreaking framework for doing exactly that. We're going to learn how to hear fear, respect it, but never, ever let it rule our future. To start things off, I want you to be totally honest and really ask yourself, is your realism just cowardice in a costume? We often think fear only looks like, a pounding heart and sweaty palms. But fear doesn't always arrive as this dramatic panic. Sometimes it sounds incredibly rational. It feels like tiredness. It feels like a strategic delay. It feels like perfectionism, or that sudden urgent need to just research one more thing, which, let's be real, usually just means watching another YouTube video before you actually take action. We dress our hesitation up in this very respectable costume of being realistic, when in reality, our fear has just learned to speak in a voice we completely trust.
But there's a brilliant way out of this trap, and it's inspired by the psychiatrist Viktor Frankl. Now, Frankl survived the absolute extremes of human suffering. And he insisted that no matter what is happening, you possess an inner choice. Fear arrives as if the verdict has already been handed down, right? It tells you that you're going to fail, that you're doomed. But there is an actual, literal space between that initial fearful stimulus and your surrender to it. It's like a pause button. And in that space, you have the power to examine the fear, choose your response, and refuse to hand over the throne of your mind to panic.
So, let's dive into Section 1, the hidden disguises of fear.
Once we realize that fear operates in that quiet space between stimulus and surrender, we've got to recognize its disguises. Because it's rarely a movie-style panic attack, usually it's just this quiet, persistent resistance to our own growth. The really uncomfortable truth is that when we hesitate, our fear is actually hired to protect something. First, it protects our old identity. Our minds actually prefer familiar suffering over unfamiliar freedom, because familiar suffering gives us the illusion of control. Second is social belonging. We secretly fear that if we grow, we're going to outgrow our tribe. So fear keeps us small so we don't threaten our relationships. Third, it protects the illusion of innocence. Think about it. If you never actually begin the work, you can always just say, well, the conditions just weren't right, and avoid taking true responsibility. And finally, and this is a massive one, fear protects potential from reality. It protects your beautiful, perfect dream from the messy, grueling discipline of actually bringing it to life. Basically, fear keeps you safely trapped in a smaller room so you never have to face the friction of reality.
Moving right along to Section 2, danger versus expansion.
Look, it is absolutely crucial to learn the difference between a fear that is actively saving your life and a fear that is simply keeping you small. Because if you can't distinguish between a legitimate threat and the mere discomfort about growing your old self, your destiny is quietly going to be ruined by false alarms. Danger says protect, withdraw, set a boundary, because something is actually violating your dignity, safety, or conscience. Danger has verifiable facts you can point to: a toxic environment, a lack of funds, physical harm. Expansion, on the other hand, is just the sensation of outgrowing the version of yourself that knew how to survive yesterday. Expansion relies on a foggy atmosphere. It doesn't have concrete facts. It's all what-ifs and maybes. It's just the discomfort of stepping into a larger life.
Have you ever heard this specific voice in your head? Who do you think you are? We all have, right? Well, if you have done your sober preparation, if you've studied, checked the facts, done the hard work, and this vague, accusatory question is still nagging at you, you are not facing danger. You are facing expansion. The fear isn't warning you about walking off a cliff. It's just defending an old identity that has never imagined itself being trusted with this new level of authority or visibility.
And here is a totally fascinating tool to help you locate exactly where you need to expand. Envy. We usually think of envy as petty or toxic, but try reframing it for a second. Envy is actually a compass distorted by shame. It points directly to a desire you haven't given yourself permission to pursue. When you envy someone's boldness, their wealth, their creativity, or their peace, your fear is just guarding the exact qualities your soul is asking you to cultivate. Envy is basically just a map to your forbidden expansion.
Okay, let's get into Section 3, calming the nervous system.
It's one thing to understand all of this intellectually, but your body doesn't wait for your mind to figure things out. Your nervous system is already reacting to the unknown. Shifting gears from psychology to biology here, we have to realize our brain is fundamentally a prediction instrument. It looks at the present, sure, but it forecasts the future using data from the past. So, if your past contains some sort of public humiliation, your brain is going to forecast humiliation the second you step onto a new stage. It literally confuses a brand new opportunity with an old wound. But you've got to remember this: unfamiliarity does not equal danger. A tense feeling in your body might just mean this new pattern hasn't been practiced yet, not that you're in actual peril.
When the brain makes that false forecast, panic sets in, and panic makes the mind global and absolute. Suddenly, everything is ruined. To regain control, you have to force those infinite anxieties into governable categories. This specific journaling exercise is an absolute game changer for this. You draw 4 columns. Under facts, you write only what is verifiably true today. Under predictions, you write the disasters your fear is inventing out of thin air. Under memories, you name the old wounds this new event is reminding you of. And finally, under commands, you write down the single next action truth requires. This totally separates the voices inside the storm and gives you a really clear path forward.
Now, if you're in a situation where you can't exactly grab a pen, you can use this physical protocol to pull your mind out of false urgency. Number 1, return to the body by lengthening your exhale and physically feeling your feet on the floor. 2, return to the environment by naming what is actually present in the room with you, not what your imagination is predicting might happen. 3, return to agency by choosing the smallest possible decision that remains yours to make. Body, environment, agency. It pulls you right out of the imagined future and drops you squarely back into the present moment.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 4, the architecture of courage.
So, you've located the hidden disguises, you've separated expansion from danger, and you've calmed your nervous system. Now, how do you actually take action while your hands are literally still shaking? You build a courage ladder. Behavioral psychology shows us that every single time you avoid something, your body learns that avoidance saved you, which actually makes the fear stronger. But you don't cure this by taking a massive, reckless leap. You do it in structured steps to train the nervous system. You place the ultimate avoided action right at the top, say, publishing your work. The bottom rung is just mild discomfort, like reading it aloud to yourself. The next rung, sharing it with one trusted friend. You complete one rung at a time. Completion is the whole point here, because completed obedience provides the body with lived evidence that it can actually survive this new life.
And as you climb that ladder, your internal architecture really has to be supported by your language. Language forms the foundation of courage. Fear absolutely loves dramatic absolute sentences. It loves stuff like, "I am doomed forever," or "I literally ruin everything I touch." You have to trade those dramatic absolute sentences for workable truths. "I am doomed" becomes, "I just need training." "This always happens to me" becomes, "This pattern is asking to be interrupted." When you change your internal commands, you quite literally organize your body and your perception differently.
And hey, if you're still hesitating, let's stop for a second and calculate the literal economic dimensions of letting fear run your calendar. Look at the opportunity cost here. Think of the sheer number of hours you spend just rehearsing defeat in your head. That is precious attention capital being burned. Think of the money you haven't asked for because you were afraid to name your true price. The work just sitting unpublished on your hard drive. The relationships kept in a state of confusion because a hard conversation was avoided. Fear is incredibly expensive. And when you actually calculate its price, courage stops being this romantic idea and starts becoming absolutely necessary.
The good news is you don't need a heroic cinematic transformation to change all of this. Just 10 minutes, honestly. 10 minutes of daily, sustained action does vastly more to rewrite your identity than some massive emotional vow you make at midnight and completely abandon by Tuesday. The body trusts rhythm way more than it trusts intensity.
And that rhythm looks exactly like this, the courage cycle. Sustainable courage has 4 distinct parts. First, you approach what your fear has exaggerated. Second, you stay in contact with it long enough to learn something true, like realizing the audience won't literally destroy you, for example. Third, you recover. You rest without punishing your body for having natural limits. And fourth, you reflect on what happened to build an archive of survival. Listen, if you skip recovery, you're going to get exhausted. If you skip reflection, you completely waste the evidence you just gathered. You need all 4 parts to make courage a permanent architecture in your life.
Which brings us right back to our core guiding metaphor for this entire explainer. Fear is a signal, not a sovereign. A properly governed life is not a fearless life. A fearless life is a complete fantasy that honestly only creates shame. A properly governed life is one where fear has a seat at the table, for sure, but it does not have the throne.
It's allowed to report information, it's allowed to bring up memories, it can tell you to be careful, but it never, ever gets to write the laws of your future. You retain that authority.
So, that leaves us with one final thought to close on. It's a question I want you to answer right now, today. What is the smallest action you can take today to prove the old fear is no longer in charge? Seriously, don't just think about it. Write it down and go do it. Give your body the concrete evidence that you have heard the signal, you have removed the crown, and the mission of your real life has finally begun.